Welcome to Reaching New Heights with Troy Bell, the city manager, City of Muskegon Heights, where you get to know what you need to know so you'll be in the know. We have a real treat for us today. We have a guest that's going to be joining us, and I'm going to go ahead and bring him into the show right now. Mr. Kenneth James. How you doing,
Hey,
sir?
Troy, how are you? Happy day before Thanksgiving to you.
Oh, thank you, and same to you. Welcome to the show.
Honored to be
So,
here.
as is it? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
That's what I said. Honored to be here. Thanks for technology. I'm actually down south visiting my parents for the holiday, but I'm glad we're able to have this conversation.
Excellent. You got to share with us down south where? I know you're
I
rubbing
am
it in,
in Byron, Georgia. So if anybody knows the big city of Byron, Georgia,
right?
then that's where I'm at. That's where I'm at.
Well, I don't know if we talked about that. You know, my family's from Adel.
Oh yeah, yeah. So it
Yeah.
is.
Okay. I
Yeah.
thought
So
we had.
you got to get off the beaten path a little bit.
That's the truth. Yes,
Yeah.
my grandfather would not argue that point. Adel, Georgia. So,
Yeah.
but I can tell you, 9 out of 10 times the weather's going to be warmer there than it is here, right?
Absolutely. Low 70s and sunny today. So I'll take it. I'll
Ouch.
take it. Yeah.
You're missing some nice cold weather here.
All right. Well, I'm only here for a few days, but I'll enjoy it while I can. So.
Excellent. Well, as is our custom with Reaching New Heights, I do want to give a brief overview of what we're doing here. Our whole objective is to talk about how the city is moving forward, all the positive things that we're doing, the positive direction that we're moving in. We want to make sure that everybody knows that you have an opportunity to comment on the show. So we are both live on StreamYard as well as available via the radio. So for those people who are listening, those people who are clicking and watching, thank you very much for joining the show. And please feel free to comment. We want to hear what your comments are. If you have questions that you want to ask about how the city is moving and things that are going on in the city, please do that. In the last show, we had a brief conversation about all the things that were on the agenda and things that were accomplished, and so that was good. I want to thank you for the questions that I got in between. Feel free to ask those questions during the show instead of having to wait till after the show, but they're still good questions nonetheless. I do want to say that for the first time, we started the demolition of the property. Shops at Sunset has started. I know we put up the fence on Peck and Sherman that's been up there for a while, and we have not had any action, but now we finally have action, and that is coming down. So bit by bit, it's not complete yet, but I just want to remind everybody that even after the building comes down, they still have to remove the contaminated soil, and there's a lot of testing that goes along with that. So be patient. You're not going to see a building come down and then tomorrow another building come up in its place. So there's a lot of time in between when we tear down the building and from the remediation or the mediation to take out the contaminated soil, bring in new soil, and then start building. So be patient, but we're underway and things are happening. So that is excellent to see that progress. So I want to make sure that we have enough time to get this interview in, and if we have time left at the end, I am going to give you some additional updates on things that are going on with the city. But first, I want to say thanks for Thanksgiving. I want to uh, make sure that everybody knows that we are celebrating Thanksgiving and we're with you, even though we might be on the radio, but in your homes, at your tables, when you serve the turkey and the food, and um, we're all with you. And we have to give thanks for all the wonderful things that have been happening, all the things that we expect to happen. And it's a good time for us to experience family. And if unfortunately you don't have family, if you have friends, be able to spend that time with friends. So one of the main jobs of local government is to make sure that we connect people with people. You don't have that problem so much in Muskegon Heights because we are the city of friendly people. But for those people that might need to feel connected or be connected, that's what we're here for, to convene and connect and provide services. So with that, I want to go ahead and move into our interview with Mr. James. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background? Because I know you are an enigma to some people. Some people don't know you, don't know who you are, but
All right.
in introducing yourselves, and that's how you and I got a chance to meet at the Us Cafe, if I'm not mistaken.
Absolutely. Well, first, speaking of the Us Cafe where I first met you, I want to thank you for your intentionality. I have a stint in my background at municipal government, and
Hmm.
not every city manager is accessible. So, being able to meet you at the Us Cafe on Wednesdays, I think is a big deal. And then platforms such as this, the transparency, the accessibility to be committed on. But my name's Ken, Chief Diversity Officer at Muskegon Community College. Troy, I've been there for just over a year. I turned a year old at MCC in September of this past year. I started in September of 2021. But prior to that, I have been in West Michigan for almost 30 years. Grand Valley alum. I earned my master's there. Some of the people that go back a little bit remember me. I worked for the city of Muskegon for about 8 years there. Went to Hackley Hospital after that for a few years before the merger. But then my career took me to the Grand Rapids area where I worked for Meyer Corporate Office, Spectrum Health, and the Grand Rapids Chamber of Commerce. I joined MCC, like I said, about a year ago as the Chief Diversity Officer. And for those of you that may be wondering what I'm doing, I am bringing the lens of DEI. And when I say DEI, that's diversity, equity, and inclusion to
Hmm.
four specific groups that the college touches. We're implementing some things for students. And I want to talk about that. MCC is the place for you. If you come there, we want to help you succeed, and you are indeed welcome there. In fact, we want you to feel like you belong there. I'm bringing some initiatives, secondly, to our faculty and staff. Are we a culturally competent institution? But then the unique part of my role is I have some outward facing pieces where we do some community initiatives. So some of the people listening or seeing this later on might be familiar with the Dr. Martin Luther King Unity Day breakfast that the college does. Next one's coming up on January 13th, 2023. Please get your tickets. But in addition to those type of community events, we want to build some, community-wide book studies and lecture series. So you'll see things like that coming out of our department. And then last but not least is Muskegon Community College has developed a platform for business training around DEI. When we say businesses, for-profit, nonprofit, K-12 entities, government entities, we provide diversity, equity, inclusion training. So that could be implicit bias. That could be the benefits of an inclusive workforce. That could be customized training. I bring with me a certification, an executive certification in diversity coaching. And so I can help businesses, one, meet their employees where they're at and build a culture where they retain the employees. But two, put some initiatives that might help diversify their work base, their consumer base, their constituent base. So that's just a little bit about who I am and what I do.
That is fantastic. You have a wonderful background, and I'm not just biased because you have public administration in your back pocket, but the work that you're doing seems to align perfectly with the needs of the university, the community college that is, and what the needs are of the greater Muskegon community. So I think that we are blessed to have you join the community college in that role, in that capacity, and the things that you're trying to do, and that you're working on. I know I had a chance to run into the president, the new president of the community college, and I know that you're in that transition, but you had the community college already had a plan in place for the succession, so to speak. And so I don't believe that you have missed a step in that process. We're sorry to see Mr. Nesberry, Dr. Nesberry, go. But if you can talk a little bit about the new president of the university,
Absolutely.
community college.
So, yeah, the vision for my department specifically was laid out by Dr. Dale Nesberry. And then he retired and left the college in a great space, especially around DEI and advancing that. In fact, some of the things that I'm enabled to do, I'm kind of the professional envy of my
Hmm.
peers because they don't, one, I'm on cabinet. I report directly. I did report directly to Dr. Nesberry. Now I report directly to Dr. John Selman. Many in the
Hmm.
community may know that he served as our executive vice president and provost for a number of years before he took over the presidency. So everything around DEI is still greenlit and is moving forward. So under his leadership, we're still advancing everything. And so I have the full support of Dr. Selman. And he recognizes the need for the college to be positioned not only for the attraction and retention for students, but our role as a community partner with that. So having his leadership and his vision and his latitude to allow me to initiate these things. A lot of people that do this type of work don't have that. So I have support. I report to the president, and I say this quietly, but I have budget. So these are things that allow us to do the work. And so thank you,
The
Dr.
money
Neff,
is
for your
important.
vision. Yep, and thank you, Dr. Selman, for your leadership.
And in my conversation with Dr. Selman, we had a chance to talk just briefly about the wonderful things that the community college is doing, and the desire and need for some of some of those things to be done in the city of Muskegon Heights. And
Yes.
so we'd love to be able to explore things. And we talked about this, like career technical education around construction trades. We talked about the possibility of bringing a police academy here locally. Um, and we talked about how we could also address other trades such as nursing, things of that nature, that I think are real needs for the city of Muskegon Heights. And the CDL training,
Mhm.
that's something that we would love to be able to do in the city of Muskegon Heights, not only because it's gives a good proximity in our city, but also these are services that I'm sure that our community can take advantage of, and not having to figure out a way to travel someplace else is always a benefit. And so hopefully those are things that maybe in special projects that might be some of the things that bubble up to you, but overall, those are things that we're trying to move towards. And before we transition and talk about Cross the Bridge, I also want to mention what you and I have been throwing around about Mona Lake Park.
Hmm.
I mean, that's a fabulous location right there on the water, one of the most underutilized jewels of our community. And I know you had some thoughts and some visions about things that we could collaborate on, and in terms of getting that active and used.
Yeah, great segue into. I am I look at successes and I like to build on successes, and I think we have a chance to be successful. And I look at opportunities.
Hmm.
I don't address things as challenge. I see them as opportunities. So
Right.
before we get into Mona Lake, when you said things about nursing and CDL training and some other specialties, construction trades, what are we doing, and how could we expand that? So I want to stay in my
Hmm.
lane, but there are opportunities. So when people say, "Hey, I'm looking for a livable wage with benefits. What do I have to do to get there?" We
Hmm.
can be that conduit. And so we might have to reactivate some old pipelines, or create some new pipelines, but there are opportunities for our people. And when I serve all of Muskegon County, but I am endeared to Muskegon Heights, and I want to make sure that everyone has the same opportunities and access as everyone has at large. So I want to explore that. And another
Hmm.
way, being engaged, excuse me, being engaged is through community outreach. And so
Right.
this past 4th of July, I had a chance to go to the festival down at the Mona Lake Park there, and we
Juneteenth
have this big
celebration.
pavilion, and there are
Right.
people that know more about it than I do, but I know about it. I'm looking at this pavilion, and I'm listening to the music, and I'm enjoying it. And I'm like, wow, how could we take that a step further? Just a thought to have it in the pavilion, and what if some refreshments were available? And then I look at some of the things that are surrounding us. I go to cities like Grand Haven, which we'll talk about later. I
Hmm.
go to cities like Muskegon and Pierre Marquette, and I see these opportunities. And then also, I'm going to kind of plug the state of Georgia here. So there is where my dad's from. There's a big lake down there, and it's actually a man-made lake because they backfilled it to run the electrical plants. So it's the water to run the generators for the electrical plants. Huge lake, but it's so much summertime usage of this lake. People fish, people use their pontoon boats, they jet ski, they water ski, and all these power boats. And I would love to see something like that. And by the way, Troy, that's in a rural area,
Hmm.
but it's a destination for people. People come and spend the day on the lake. Why
Right.
can't that happen in at Mona Lake? So
Exactly.
again, easier said than done. But when we look at this pavilion there, what if there was a seasonal restaurant? I'm just hypothetical, or
Hmm.
a chain restaurant, and people came in, and then they could use the water and fish and boat and jet ski and those things, and just enjoy that. And I have to give homage. Like I said, I'm not new to this community. There was
Hmm.
some work done in the late 90s, early 2000s, around that. And if I
Right.
recall, the studies that were done, Mona Lake warms up faster than Lake Michigan and Muskegon Lake because of its depth. And so
Hmm.
people can have access to the water sooner if there was a draw. And so,
Right.
so when we talk about these innovative things, how can we do that? And by the way, you might hear a bell ringing. I'm in my parents' sitting room, and they like grandfather clocks. So
Okay.
okay, that's
No
the bell.
worries.
But so when we talk about these things, it's not a yes, but it's to me it should
Hmm.
be a yes and. And what
Right.
do we have to do to make it a reality?
That's again, the when I look at Muskegon Heights and the potential is there, the opportunity is there. There are several communities that are landlocked, don't have access to water, don't have access to property or vacant land, that all they can do is what they can do. And when we realize the amount of potential and opportunity that exists in the city of Muskegon Heights, we start out the gate with we were very close to having a world class boat race on Muskegon in Muskegon Heights at Mona Lake, and we had to cancel that because of the pandemic, unfortunately. And now that we're moving away from the pandemic, we're not totally in the clear. That's something that I would like to bring back. The only reason why we didn't ink that at Mona Lake is because of the pandemic. So that now is the time for us, if we can bring the boat race back. We've got the Juneteenth celebration with the fireworks over the water. We have the opportunity for renting equipment on the lake. We have the opportunity to bring boats and ships in and take advantage of the pavilion there. There is so much opportunity, and it's not like something that there isn't a script for it. Like you said, there were studies that were done. We already know that the lake is warmer than typical, so um, there's an opportunity there. But if we look at what is happening at Pierre Marquette, that is a perfect example of what can happen. And if
Mm-hmm.
we look at that example just as a baseline of what can happen, we know that we can even do better than that. I mean, if you look at the flavor of Muskegonites, we have arts, we have music, we have culture, and we take all those things and put them on display, put them into use at the pavilion. You know, that is something that's way above what you have at Pierre Marquette. That
Mm-hmm.
we have the opportunity on the water,
Yeah.
and I would say even at Pierre Marquette, you can't see the water.
Mm-hmm.
The dunes are in the way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
At
it's
Mona
it's an
Lake,
opportunity. I mean, I can see the vision,
yes.
and how do we, get the word out, get the
Hmm.
what is the right domino to fall so that we can make these things a
Right.
reality. Yeah.
And there's only two boat launches on Mona Lake, and one of them is in a private club. The only public boat launch is right there in Muskegon Heights at
Right.
Mona Lake, and
Near the
taking
pavilion.
advantage of that.
Yeah, near the pavilion. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But now that we talked about that, I do want to go back and talk about the wonderful thing that I had an opportunity to participate in, and I didn't realize it at the time that you were involved as well, because I just kind of signed up and went back to trying to make the city better, and said, just tell me where to show up and when to show up. And that was the Cross the Bridge. So, can you describe for our listeners what the Cross the Bridge whole setup was about?
Absolutely. So this is prior to me joining MCC,
Hmm.
Troy. But before I joined, Dr. Dale Nesbury, his name comes up again. He was in talks with Barbara, who runs the Momentum Center in Grand Haven, about a grassroots program to kind of tear down that stigma or stereotype between
Hmm.
Muskegon and Grand Haven as communities.
Right.
There's a bridge that separates the two communities, and if people feel like they can't go across one way or the other, people from Muskegon don't necessarily go to Grand Haven. People from Grand Haven don't necessarily come to Muskegon. So we thought, what if we put together a group of leaders and individuals from the respective communities to
Hmm.
kind of tear down some of these things? And so what we piloted this past fall was a cross the bridge experience. We had about 10 folks from Grand Haven that came and spent an immersive experience in Muskegon.
Hmm.
They actually stayed in Muskegon Heights and overnight, and we went to some high school football games, and we had a chance to just tour downtown Muskegon Heights, downtown Muskegon, the Lakeshore, just to kind of say, here's who we are, here's what we offer. And we celebrated the things that we do well, and we also looked at some of the things that may plague the community. But we also did the opposite, and that's where you participated. We had about 8 or 9 individuals from the Muskegon Heights area that went
Hmm.
to Grand Haven and spent a weekend, and just to say, how does things work here? How do we, tear down those stereotypes? And
Right.
so, for instance, some people might have the disclaimer that there's no poverty in Grand Haven, but that's not true. People in Grand Haven might feel if they, that everything in Muskegon is dangerous because they don't have any connection. Well, what we found was by having these experiences, we were
Hmm.
able to dispel those myths, and people were like, "Wow, what are we, gravitating toward?" So we had a successful experience in each community, started these grassroots dialogues, and what we're doing now is starting a kind of a listening tour. We want to move this forward so we can do this a minimum of once, if not more frequently, in 2023, just to have small groups of people have dialogue around tearing down the stereotypes between our two communities. And and I would love to hear as a participant what your takeaway was. But that was the premise of the program.
Yes, and I will say quite honestly, as a new person coming in, I didn't even realize there was a bridge there until they started working on
All right,
it, and I got caught in the traffic,
right.
and I said, "Oh, now that's why what people are talking about when they talk about the bridge." But I can't say that I felt like when I went through that space and I was on the other side of what I now know as the bridge, that things did kind of feel a little bit different,
Mm-hmm.
and it felt like folks were looking at me a little different. Like when I was in Muskegon, I got the sense that people looked at me and said, "Well, we can understand why you're here." That was implicit in their eyes. But when I was in Grand Haven, the stare, the look was more along the lines of, "What are you doing here, and why do you want to be here?" And I never really put a finger on it. Couldn't understand it precisely, but I will say, as a result of this process and the opportunity to go down there to Grand Haven and stay for a weekend and experience the different restaurants that are there and the different attractions that were there, I do see that area through a different lens now than I
Mm-hmm.
did before.
Mm-hmm.
There are still some issues that I have, and being a former police officer, some of the enforcement issues are things that I still have to work through. And we had that conversation with the law enforcement folks that were there. But I think overall that the chance, the opportunity that this program gave me as an individual and us as a group was a fabulous opportunity to have an exchange. I do feel like the real benefit can come out of bringing the group that went to Muskegon together with the group that went to Grand Haven and having a dialogue and a conversation in the moment, but also continuing that dialogue and conversation over the years, if you will. I think is going to have a lot of value because I mean I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you remember the people that came to Grand Haven? Can you
I
call them?
Yeah, yeah. Don't ask me to call names.
Right.
Jennifer might be watching. I remember Jennifer's name, of course, but
Yes, she was
but
there.
no, but to your point. In fact,
Hmm.
I know you're a busy man. December 16th, we're trying to bring the groups together before we head
Hmm.
into to the end of the year type festivities. But
Right.
your point is well taken. And what we've done is exposed both communities to different things, and we're starting
Hmm.
this grassroots conversation. So I use this analogy. Think of this stereotype as a pond, and it's smooth.
Okay.
And we've cast a stone into this pond, so we're trying to create positive ripple effects.
Hmm.
And to your point, if we have a grassroots conversation that's growing, that will
Right.
help tear down some of those stereotypes. And that's the first step we've taken that we're trying to do. And we want others to be aware of it. One, we're going to need more participants, but two, it's not free to run it, but it's not about making money for profit. It's about making money for the experience. And how
Right.
can we generate this experience so that we can continue to have others going? And that's where we're at right now. I think we experience a lot of success, and we've exposed things we have to debrief. Why do
Right.
those things feel, people, for instance, that live in Muskegon but work in Holland, I'm not going to stop in Grand Haven because of how it makes me feel. And they don't like that perception. Or people that live in Grand Haven are like, oh, there's no way, I'm going to get, go to have dinner at what we know as a fine restaurant because of what street it sits on or something like that.
Right.
So we are really working to trying to tear some of that down.
And I think one of the things that we have to be willing and able to do is take those that mass of stereotypes and filter through that and identify what are stereotypes and what have some realistic truth to them,
Mm-hmm.
and be able to dispel the stereotypes for what they are, but also figure out a way how we can work our way through those things that do have some realistic basis to them. Yeah, I've said it in many occasions in all the places that I've lived throughout the country that usually two things happen. One is people look at me as I'm invisible because they want to believe I shouldn't be there. So if I'm walking down the street, I'm invisible, and they'll actually run into me on the sidewalk and look at me like, What are you doing on the sidewalk?"
Mm-hmm.
And then the other is walk into a restaurant and the music will stop
Mm-hmm.
because the thought is you have no right to be here. This is our space and not your space. And what are you doing here? So
Mm-hmm.
it's usually one or the other. And I found that when I was in Grand Haven, that there were some people that looked at me one way, um, which was either I was invisible or I didn't belong there, and there were people that looked at me and greeted me with a warm and open arms.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not one or the other. I think there are some people that we have to filter through and understand that there's a group here that represents one interest, and there's another group that is not related to that interest at all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I know exactly what you're talking about, just our lived experiences as Black men.
Right.
And then by nature of the positions we hold, it might get us into circles that not everybody sees, and you have to deal with just that. But I
Hmm.
also, because I try to create those teachable moments. Another one of my teaching mantras is familiarity brings about awareness. And so what we want to do is create that familiar experience to have these awarenesses, and people, because again, I'm not naive, Troy. We're kind of getting deep because this bias that we're talking about, these preconceived
Hmm.
notions, they run deep. And people have, but I'm not talking about the person that woke up this morning and said, I'll never like Ken or Troy because of the color of their skin. What I am talking about is just the person that's been going through life
Right.
and have their blinders on because of their experiences, and they don't know how to interact with someone different than themselves. I think when we create these experiences, we're able to kind of permeate a little bit further and make it a more cohesive society. But it's not easy. And this thinking, people didn't arrive there overnight. They're not going to change it overnight, but we're going to keep creating these experiences, these familiar experiences, so that we can have a greater awareness. That's what's driving activities such as this.
And I do believe that that perception is reality, and reality can be addressed from the top down. It has to start with the leadership.
It does.
And I do want to commend you for this group, because I think you had a lot of leaders in it. I mean, you had Miss Ross. I think Kaya Thornton was also part of that. Contessa Hood. Um, you had members of the Muskegon City Commission that were also involved in it. A school board member.
Correct.
So I believe if we can address the perception um, beginning at that level, then everything else is possible as you move down from there. And I know I haven't had a chance to meet everybody that went to Muskegon, but I know that you had one of the city managers from, was it
Yeah, we had the Grand Haven city manager, we had the village manager of Spring Lake, as well as the supervisor for
Spring Lake?
zoning
That's
down
it.
south.
Chris
Yeah.
Burns from Spring Lake.
Yeah, so we had
Mhm.
so again, same thing, leaders, people that were poised to make a difference and kind of spread this message. Yeah.
Right. Well, can you share with our listeners what your role was in this process? Because I don't think that, I mean, Barbara did a great job, but I don't want to, as one of the co-directors of this program and this process, and maybe the brainchild of it, but your role was important. So, can you talk a little bit about what you were able to bring to the table as
Yeah.
part of that?
Yeah, definitely a team effort. So we wanted to create a rich cultural and experiential experiences for everyone in both communities. So there was kind of
Mhm.
that grassroots. We're calling folks. We're arranging things. So the contribution is not just of thought. It was of time and it was of dollars to make sure it happened.
Mhm.
So co-sponsored Momentum Center, Muskegon Community College. But when you start talking about hotel rooms and feeding people because it didn't cost you a dime, transportation, everything from the most minute, detail to everything was kind of that team effort, and we made sure it
Mhm.
happened. But also that included when we had dialogue in between our experiences. There was a little bit of forethought. What open-ended questions are we going to ask? So we created a curriculum, if you will, to get people thinking about what did I just experience it. Had there been any change or has something transformed, and then what I'm going to do next. But you did hit up on a key point, Troy. I think bringing the groups together, having the folks that were from that side of the bridge, and I say that affectionately, having our Grand Haven neighbors experience Muskegon and Muskegon Heights, having our Muskegon and Muskegon Heights neighbors experience Grand Haven, bringing those groups together to talk about this is what I didn't know, or this is what I thought and I see it differently now. That's part of that positive ripple effect. When you
Right.
have people that have influence that can talk, when they have their conversations tomorrow over their Thanksgiving dinner, can say, "Hey, I
Mhm.
see things differently now because of this, and here's something we should attempt to do or try to do, or not replicate, whatever it is." That's where the power is.
I agree, 100%. And I want to make sure that I appreciate the fact that you were part of that process. And I
Mm-hmm.
see that Miss Ross chimed in. I did not want to cite the names of people that I had not spoken to and mention them, but since you've already put them in on the chat, I will express thanks to part of our group was Rebecca St. Clair and Kwame James. They were part of the group that had a chance to go down to Grand Haven and spend the weekend there. And so now that their names are out there, I'm going to go ahead and mention
All
them.
right.
So, um, I think that you had a chance to participate in this and lead this, but you also had a chance to speak to the West Coast City Managers Group,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I caught the tail end of that meeting coming all the way out there. I guess it was almost an hour and a half drive to get out there. But can you talk about what you expressed to that group? And that was a group of all the city managers
Mm-hmm.
for the west side of Muskegon, Ottawa, etc.
Yeah, yeah, a group that you're very familiar with. So a consortium of city managers from all over West Michigan convene, and
Hmm.
this particular day, going back to that mantra I just said, familiarity brings about awareness.
Right.
Because of some of the conversations I've had
Hmm.
with other municipal leaders around diversity, equity, inclusion, they're like, kind of give us an overview of what DEI means and how we can incorporate this into our respective communities. So what I did was just that. I had a chance to sit down over lunch with some leaders, from as far north as Ludington, as far east as Ionia,
Hmm.
and in different places as far south as Saugatuck, and to come together and say, hey, when you talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, here's how it shows up. But because, like you said, I have that municipality experience in my background, I share some experiences about lessons learned because I understand the talk and I understand what it takes to walk that walk. And we want to spread that message. And so we want, going back to what I do, Muskegon Community College to be a resource for
Hmm.
any entity, and that could include public entities that want to advance that diversity, equity, and inclusive message because they are indeed serving a diverse community.
Beautiful. And you were, I could tell when I got there that you were well received and the message was well received. And I think you have folks in that group who are DEI minded,
Mm-hmm.
that have a DEI perception, who don't know exactly how or don't feel comfortable or are not ready today, but maybe tomorrow to engage in DEI work. Being DEI, excuse me, DEI minded is one thing. Operationalizing that is another thing. And
Mm-hmm.
I think the you at least broach the subject that would allow them to lean in to the areas of being DEI operational and how they can do that and do it in a way that will be well received and perceived.
And I'm glad you articulated that the way that you did. Sometimes taking the first step
Hmm.
is that, and people don't know where the first step might be, or um, I don't
Go
see
ahead.
an issue. I've even had city leaders say, "Well, my community is not diverse, so we don't have any diversity issues." How do you unthink that mindset? And say
Hmm.
no, no. And a room can look the same and be extremely diverse.
Right.
And then you have different things, whether it's socioeconomics or urban versus rural or whatever the case may be, and to do that. And so sometimes helping people understand, here's the first step, here's a good place to start. That's part of the journey, part of the process.
And I have shared, and even when I was in the classroom and the educational arena, I was adamant about expressing to people that it's not just about me being, as a black man, being in a classroom to be able to be present as a role model to black students, but it's also about being able to be a role model to those non-black students and how important that is, because when they come to work for me as a city manager, I don't want their first experience to be with a leadership of an African American male to be me. And so the opportunity to have that in a classroom before they get to me is important. And I think when we talk to city managers that might be leading predominantly white, homogeneous environments, realizing that that is not the world, that is not our country. And at some point in time, if folks leave this area and go to other areas, they're going to have to interact with people that don't look like them. They're going to have to interact with people of color, that people that may have different socioeconomic status, might have be challenged in certain disabilities or orientations. That is the world that they're going to have to navigate and understand. And your job is important to be able to affect and impact change today before they get there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think again, the what you're doing, scratching that surface, allows the opportunity for them to lean in, and it takes away the obstacle
Right.
for them to lean in.
Yeah. Well,
I
well,
think that's
well. You mentioned something there, and I couldn't agree more. I always say that I could agree, but I couldn't agree more. But to make
right.
sure I had that right. But I have the conversation. So even I work in higher ed. We have to prepare our students for a global economy, a global society. That's why we have these conversations. I talk to these municipal leaders, and they say, "Okay, we want," because it all ties in: tourism, attraction of business, retention of business, just a changing demographic. People are moving in and out of communities for different reasons, and if you're not ready to embrace that, just through the lens of I can handle differences, you might be doing yourself a disservice. So you throw your name on these tourism websites, come to our community. Well, if
Hmm.
people aren't feeling like they are, let alone welcome, or they don't feel like they belong in their community, you've done yourself a disservice. That's why we have these conversations.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, I'm hopeful in general that the work that the city of Muskegon Heights has done in putting together the vision plan, and I know you've touched on that in certain bits and pieces and parts, where we've been able to articulate where we want to go as a city and a community, and all the pieces that are important to make that happen. But for the first time, putting that on a piece of paper to say in 5 to 10 years, this is what we want our community to look like, is a document that is helping make all the things that you do and all the things that the community college aspires to do possible.
Mhm.
I know that it has made it easier for people outside of our community to lean in. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we've been successful in raising $30 million worth of grant funds in a community where that did not receive any grant funds for the last 10 years, or minimal grant funds for the last 10 years. Because we, for the first time, we have a vision that's articulated and drawn out and has an image associated with it. People are beginning to say, okay, we can get on board. You, this is where you want to go. You might have to tweak it, it might have to change, but we can get on board and we can put our money behind it because we know where you're trying to go.
Mhm.
And that might be a 5 degrees to the left or 5 degrees to the right, but it's not, definitely not 180 degrees in the opposite direction. So I'm hopeful that that as we continue forward, that these types of documents will make it easier or pave the way for the work that you're doing, both with Across the Bridge and where that goes in the future, but also with our aspirations to bring services and possibly a location from the community college downtown Muskegon Heights. I mean, that would be one of the things that I think would be a catalyst for change in Muskegon Heights. And I know Dr. Selman from our conversation was amenable to it, so
Yes.
we'll see. And I understand you have to stay in your lanes.
I stay in my lane, but I like I can initiate some dialogue. So
Right,
keep it moving. Keep it
right.
moving.
And you notice I said lanes plural.
Yeah. If I could say this, and I don't
Hmm.
know how we're doing on time,
Hmm.
but just for anybody that might be listening, and when they think of Muskegon Community College, it is a place for you, and
Hmm.
you can see yourself there. So if you are what we would call a traditional student, you graduated from high school, you're looking for that next step. There are opportunities there, and see yourself at MCC, or maybe you want to pivot. A lot of things have happened, and you want to get retrained, and you might be over the age of 25. See
Hmm.
yourself there, and in fact, there are programs for both. We have things to make our tuition very accessible for our
Hmm.
mainstream, just graduated from high school students to folks that are over the age of 25,
Right.
where it might be more accessible than you think in terms of cost and flexibility. And then, of course, now, taking different programs, evenings, weekends, virtually, the college has met its obligation to our who we serve to make it as easy as possible. So if you haven't explored MCC in a while, check us
Hmm.
out, because there's ways to pay for it, and there's ways to get it done that doesn't benefit that will not, take away from your day-to-day schedule. We can fit it in. So if you haven't talked to us in a while, reach out, and I'm happy to connect anybody that reaches out to me. I can be found on our website, or you can just Google Ken James MCC. If you come through me through the college, through LinkedIn, through my email,
Right.
text message, I'll get you connected with who you need to talk to.
And the community college fills a very important gap and a niche, and we would not be where we are without it. I mean, I look back at, and this is a world away, but Walla Walla, Washington,
Mm.
which is now the largest wine producing area outside of Napa Valley, now started with the viticulture program at the community college.
Wow.
If it wasn't for that viticulture program filling the gap that existed for people who are interested in learning about wine and how to produce wine, that would have never happened in Walla Walla. And today, look at what they've been able to produce because of the community college.
Wow.
So,
So you said these stories, and if you scratch the surface, you go deep. How many people listening right now know that Muskegon Community College has an entrepreneur certificate program?
no,
So you can come take classes, and it gives you the foundational tools that you need to start your business, or if you're already in business, to expand it, to make it further, to do so. Just these
right.
things, so you can come get certified right here in our own backyard to help you achieve what you want to achieve. And so again, just if you haven't talked to someone at MCC in a while, please do, please do.
Well, definitely. And thank you for joining our show today. And thank
My
you
pleasure.
for bringing that information to light because the things that you're talking about, people need to know. And we talk about, reaching new heights. This is part of reaching new heights where you get to
Yeah,
know what you need to know so you'll be in the know. This information is important and people need to know that. So thank you very much for being a guest today. And I appreciate you coming to the show. And as we wrap up, I do want to recognize Thanksgiving again. And so in the room here, I have my boys with me. So I'm
outstanding.
going to bring them on. Come here, Anderson. They've been listening to us. So fortunately, they're out of school. This is Anderson, the youngest,
Hey, Anderson.
and Tui,
Hey,
the
Tui.
second oldest.
All right.
Yep. So they've been here listening to us as part of the radio show. No, you can leave now. So, but in honor and thanks for Thanksgiving, I'm glad that they were able to join us for the show, and I'm
Awesome.
sure you're spending time with your family there. And for all those that we cannot see, we want to take the time to again wish you happy Thanksgiving and the time that you can spend with family. Make sure you do that. I do want to encourage you to come out on December 5th for the budget. We're going to be discussing the budget for the city of Muskegon Heights, and that's an important thing that basically sets the foundation for us in the next year. So we're going to be talking about the budget for 2023. So if you have an interest or questions about it, come out on December 5th. If you want to see it before December 5th, you can reach the city manager's office at 231-733-8870, and we can provide you with a copy of the budget so that you can take a look at that and come with questions on December 5th. And then also on November 28th, which is our next council meeting, we have the American Rescue Plan funding that's going to be on that agenda. And we want you to come out. We've already had a consultant that's gone through the process with that and made recommendations based on the cross-section of community focus group and surveys associated with that, with where the funding priorities should be. And I think there was 9 priorities that he came up with. So we're hopeful that the council will take a look at that and approve those funding priorities. And then we can begin the process at a later meeting on what projects fall within which funding priorities. So we're excited about that because that, again, is the foundation by which we can then go outside of Muskegon Heights to like the county and say, let's look at your American Rescue Plan funds. And we want you to spend some of those American Rescue Plan funds in Muskegon Heights to match the things that we're already doing. And that ask is already there for $6.5 million to marry that with the funding priorities that hopefully council will approve on November 28th at 5:30. So those are the only announcements that I want to cover. Anything you want to add before we wrap up, Mr. James?
Thanks for the opportunity. And from where I sit and from where you sit, let's keep the pipeline open and keep moving forward.
Okay, excellent.
All right.
Well, thank you everybody for tuning in, for clicking on, and for tuning in to Reaching New Heights, 1037 The Beat with Troy Bell, the city manager, city of Muskegon Heights, where you get to know what you need to know so you'll be in the know. Thanks and continue to be blessed. Have a great day.